out of our live Studio One booking, which we have every week. We are a live show. We are there every week forever, okay?
What was the name of that show?
And they cancel us.
What was the name of that show, Dean?
It was Are You a Star? But at that point, we were doing John Ashford.
I see.
Okay?
Yeah.
He was this famous black shoe designer, the only black shoe designer in the world.
Well,
And so you have a black president being elected, and that night they threw Rich Gethard on the station to get out the white college vote.
wow.
And we walked in, and I said, so where's our studio? He says, oh, well, you don't have a studio tonight. I said, what do you mean we don't have a studio? I have 20 women coming in and a shoe designer and a band. And at that point, they had pulled in every white voice to push out this quote-unquote hipster get out the vote. And I looked at them, and in fact, they were violating every rule because there was pizza they were eating in all these places, and you're not allowed to have food in the studio. They broke every rule, and they put us black people in this little 8 by 16-foot room, and I had 5,000 more people than them.
Yeah, no, I know.
I had 20 girls.
I know. Once, I was so gullible for so many years. Joe really opened my eyes up to how much I'd been abused. But I had a guest once. She was a princess from the Schaghticoke Indian tribe. The Schaghticokes fought on the side of Washington, and the United Nations worked with her grandfather, They worked with her grandfather to create what became the United Nations. And she came in her full, princess Indian royal regalia. She was beautiful with the braids, and I couldn't get into the studio. No reason, all of a sudden, I couldn't get into the studio. And unfortunately, she's passed away since then. This would have been an extremely important interview. It's like every time you had a really important guest, they would block the studio. On the other hand,
that's very significant because the franchise agreement says that there's not supposed to be any editorial control.
But
listen.
Listen. And then the other extreme is I wondered once how Roberto was so savvy on Karen Hudes being a whistleblower for the World Bank. She eventually turned out to be a lame-o and called me and Joe Vatican operatives, because she's not getting the ratings that she wants on the internet. I thought, how could Roberto figure this out? Well, no, listen, let me finish. Dean.
Paula, but never a Vatican operative. I can't believe that one.
No, listen, but I thought, how could Roberto figure this out? Well, it's easy. He figures out who the lamos are because they let you go ahead and interview them and work with them, and as soon as there's somebody good, they block it. So that's why the staff was always so hip, and I always felt when I was there, how come I don't really understand what's going on here?
Well, no, and in my case, it got really serious because as Dee Dee was talking about, she was being banned, and in my case, one of my regular guests and co-hosts, who is also an independent producer, was told explicitly, and he was actually stand-up enough guy to provide a sworn affidavit. In my case, Greg Sutton, at a meet and greet social function at M&N, took my regular co-host and guest aside and told him not to appear on my shows. So that's censorship. That's editorial control.
I got you one step better. Zenaida Mendez, who was Charlie Rangel's chief of staff, who is the public outspoke person for them, was canceling our shows, our bookings that we had made, and putting hers in.
Right.
So you can see that there's trouble in paradise, and all of this comes down to we should have someone at the helm of M&N who really believes in the public access channels and champions them and supports them and takes care of them and serves the true intent, which is to provide the sources of information and showing how government works and providing education. But we don't have that. What we've got is, politics, commercial interests, dirty tricks, dirty dealings, and ultimately, the public is not served.
So what happened on Thursday?
So what
let me
happens
tell you what happened on Thursday. I see a woman being slammed down on the granite floor.
Yeah, they beat me. So let me
Marshall hitman.
Yeah, they beat me. So what happened was Didi Halleck is going into she's doing her lawsuit, and we all have interests. So Dean and I go down there, and I have organized up our. We can't understand. We sent our notices of claim. The city never responds to us. We've got all our affidavits. We don't get it. There's something really wrong. So we go down on Thursday. There's supposed to be something called a pre-motion conference to discuss proposed motion to dismiss. Now, and Judge Pauly is the federal district judge who's doing this in the Southern District of New York. So the first thing I say is, well, wait a minute. Judge Pauly's individual rules and practices are violating the federal rules of civil procedure, because usually you file a complaint, and then the defendants, who are M&N in the city, have to answer the complaint. An answer can only be yes, no, or I don't know. They have to rebut every single paragraph of the complaint with either, paragraph 1, yes, paragraph 2, no, paragraph 3, we don't know. That's the only thing they can do in an answer, but they do not provide an answer. So if they want to weasel out of doing an answer, their only other recourse is to do a motion to dismiss under Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 12B, failure to state a claim. And, it's a short list. If you go and look at the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, everybody always does the motion to dismiss, failure to state a claim. You pick from, like, the few excuses that you have. But they didn't do that either. So they didn't respond the way they were supposed to. So I said, wait, this is great. That means that Didi Halleck and her co-defendant sued the city and M&N, and the defendants defaulted. They didn't provide an answer, and they didn't make a motion to dismiss. Oh, but now the city attorneys and the plaintiff's attorney are getting together for a pre-motion conference to discuss a proposed motion, and they're putting in these letters, and these letters are baseless. Now, an attorney is not supposed to go in and just start making a false court record. He's supposed to be affirming based on some evidence, affidavits of his clients, irrefutable documentary evidence, something other than, well, we'll just make a letter where we're fabricating stuff. So, I draft this into my communication with the court, and I say, wait, just 1 second here. This is Judge Pauly legislating from the bench. He just sort of made this stuff up. He suspended the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and inserted his own individual rules and practices. I'm like, you can't do that. You're legislating from the bench. Well, they didn't want to hear that. So, Dean and I go down there, and we're sitting there, and I showed up around 9:45, and I gave everyone courtesy hard copies of my communication with my notice of claim, Dean's notices of claim, 3 or 4 affidavits, all of which greatly support Didi Halleck's case. And in this packet of information that I provided, it shows clearly that there is a state actor, and it shows clearly that there is no statute of limitations in Didi's case. The only 2 arguments they're making against her is there is no state actor, and there's a statute of limitations issue. So I'm like, first of all, there is a state actor, and to bring this full circle, Paula Gloria started explaining this very well at the beginning of the show, where she's saying that the city is a franchisor. So the city has control over the franchisee, Time Warner Cable. So there's an intimately involved city actor, and as Terry Blankard, our expert witness, pointed out, these public access, these franchises were created by the city actors, the state actors, and the federal actors. So there is a state actor involved.
Now,
and there
Lidya,
is no...
I'm sorry. I almost bought a house in Woodstock, and I bought in Saratoga Springs, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. What is the name of the state actor?
Gail Brewer, the Manhattan Borough President.
Who is going to be the future mayor of Manhattan.
Right,
Folks,
what happened, wait, just let me get the audience through this, because we got about 20 minutes left. So the only argument, Dee Dee Halleck files this complaint. She never mentions Gail Brewer, but we had meetings there, and Gail Brewer's office was intimately involved. So there is a state actor. There's even more state actors, because when we filed our notices of claim, Dean and I and Paula Gloria, we had to notify the comptroller.
And Ann Rouse, too.
Yeah, there you go.
Everyone.
And here's another state actor.
The commissioner for DOITT.
There you go.
Comptroller.
And the comptroller, wait, even better, I was litigating with the state attorney general's office. So I got them involved for reasons we don't have time. For reasons I don't have time to go into. But there are many state actors. So, and then there is no statute of limitations issue, because this is a conspiracy to deprive rights. Because Dee Dee says that she was banned without a hearing, but we were banned without a hearing too for sticking up for Dee Dee. Paula was banned, I was banned, Dean was banned, and guess what? All of a sudden, these banned producers started coming out of the woodwork. There was one from like 5 years ago. There was another producer who was banned 10 years ago. There's never been a hearing at M&N before they ban you. They just ban you. So this is a conspiracy to deprive rights. So there is the arguments that they were trying to put forth to have Dee Dee's case dismissed just were groundless. So Dean and I show up, and I organize this information into a packet of information, and Mr. Perry shows up, who's Dee Dee Halleck's attorney, and the city has their attorneys, and M&N has their attorneys, and I provide the courtesy copy to the judge, and they all read through it. So now, mind you, these are sworn affidavits, and there's other information that greatly supports Dee Dee's case that my other co-producers and regular guests were providing. So they go on record, and they start to create this false court record, which is a fraud upon the court by court officers. And Dean and I are like flabbergasted. So I politely raise my hand, and now what's supposed to happen is we've been told this over and over again. In fact, when I tell this story, there are other people who are like, would you like an affidavit from me? Because I go to state court all the time, and that's exactly what you're supposed to do. You raise your hand, the bailiff comes over, or sometimes the law clerk comes over, and you express a concern, and it's the job of the bailiff or the court security officer or the law clerk to bring the judge's attention to the fact that, there's someone who needs to be heard, because it's our job to give the judge full, true, and complete information, not to deceive the judge. So I raise my little hand as I'm listening to these attorneys for the city make a false court record and try to deceive Judge Pauly. And I'm thinking, the court security officer comes over. Before I can even get the words out of my mouth, the court security officer is threatening me with physical violence. I'm going to grab you, take you out of here, shut up. I'm like, that's not what you're supposed to be doing.
Did you witness that, Dean?
Yeah, and you know what the point is? Judge Pauly was, when he first started as an attorney, set up the Nassau County public access channels for Al D'Amato.
Wow.
And Giano in Nassau County, Long Island.
So the court officer was telling Lydia, you be quiet or I'm going to hurt you?
Oh, he ordered us not to stand up and go to the judge, or he would throw us and eject us out of the court physically.
What did you do?
Well, it gets better. I mean, I raised my hand, and I was threatened with coercive, unlawful, excessive force. That's not what's supposed to go on. And then Dean was so shocked. He's like, "Wait a minute! I'm going to tell the judge that this shouldn't be happening to you." And we have information that the judge needs to know. So Dean politely and silently raises his hand. The court security officer comes running over and threatens Dean. The two of us were dumbfounded. So, we were like completely taken aback. As Judge Pauly is leaving the bench, he acknowledges us, and something must have happened. He must have been goaded behind our backs. And I say this because his reaction was so over the top and so beyond the pale. He was red in the face, and he started yelling at us, saying, "This is not a classroom. I'm not here to." He used words and phrases to the effect that I'm not here to educate you. This is not a learning process. And Dean and I were totally flabbergasted.
What was it that the judge was leaving? He got up very quickly from he terminated his discussion, got up very quickly and started to leave. That's when I raised my voice and said, "Your Honor, we got something to say." And then he went off on us like a banshee.
Have you ever had this before, Lidya and Dean? Because you're both experienced court observers, if not litigating your own cases.
Yeah, no, actually, in that courtroom, and at 500 Pearl Street, I had been there, in September and October on other issues, and I was told by one of the bailiffs, "Listen, sit here quietly. If you have something, just raise your hand. We'll come over." This is like standard operating procedure. You're supposed to be efficiently taking care of the business of the court. If you go to state court, it happens all the time. You raise your hand, the bailiff comes over. It's the bailiff's job or the court security officer's job or the law clerk's job to, if you have documents, to give them to the judge or to convey information personally. So when we're sitting there and we're listening to the city's attorneys provide false, misleading, and inaccurate information to a federal judge, we have a duty to speak up. But we didn't speak up. We silently raised our hands, waited to be recognized, and instead, it was like we had done something wrong, but we had done nothing wrong. This was the usual customary practice. So Dean and I don't know what to make of this, where we were totally, taken aback. And I, got a chance to talk to the law clerk. I said, "Did you give my documents to the judge?" And he was completely dismissive, treated us like, dirt.
Oh, is that Kyle Wood? Because I emailed Kyle.
Yes, I wanted to tell you what was interesting during the hearing was that Judge Pauly acknowledged that you had sent him an email, and he read your name on the record, and he said, he said this explicitly, "I caused your email to be placed on the docket." So we were like, "Wow, that's great." And now, before the hearing had started at about 9:45, when I came in to give everybody my courtesy
Excuse me,
copies,
I caused you. He said Lidya Radin caused Paula Gloria Sakanis Barton's email to be.
No. He said no. It was Judge Pauly who said, "I got an email from Paula Gloria Sakanis Barton, and I got it last night." He asked both sides, "Did you get a chance?" And he said, Judge Pauly caused the communication from Paula Gloria to be placed on the docket."
Oh, I see.
So it was the judge who had taken your email and put it on the docket, and then he asked both sides, "Did you get a chance to look at it?" And they said yes. They had briefly seen it at about 7 o'clock at night. And he also went on to schedule a pre-motion conference for you on September 19th to discuss your proposed motion to intervene as of right under Rule 24. So Paula Gloria is making a motion to intervene as of right under Rule 24 because she has an interest. If there's a negative ruling, a negative outcome in Dee Dee Halleck's case for a producer who has been banned without a hearing, that would create a barrier for Paula Gloria. So Paula Gloria would have to overcome that barrier in her own case. So she has an interest that she needs to protect. And what you have to show in your motion to intervene, you have to show that there's some sort of collusion between the attorneys, that no one's protecting your right. You don't really have to show malfeasance, but we can show that too. So what these folks unwittingly did when they created this false court record and were misleading a judge, a federal judge, they were actually showing and giving to Paula and me and Dean the very elements that we needed to make successful motions to intervene as of right under Federal Rules of Civil Procedure Rule 24. So we got that. We got the collusion between the attorneys. Nobody spoke up and said, "Pardon me, sir, these are false, misleading statements that we're giving to a federal judge." So you have, you got that in place. So the judge did say this, and he did say that you were expected in court February 19th for your proposed...
Which room?
For your pre-motion conference, a pre-motion conference for your proposed motion, which is great because...
Courtroom 20B.
Courtroom 20B?
Mm-hmm.
At what time? What time?
Which is, I don't know, probably 10... 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I think.
Okay.
I got to check. Which is great because, Dean and I will show up as your witnesses, and of course you're going to present us as your witnesses to refute all the arguments against Dee Dee Halleck and you. There are state actors involved, and there is no statute of limitations because this is an ongoing conspiracy to deprive rights. This is a very important civil rights issue. And what's sad about what's happening with Dee Dee Halleck is, as I said before, had her attorney just attached to her complaint, had she named in her complaint the state actor, Gail Brewer, the Manhattan Borough President, and spoken in some depth and detail about the meetings at Gail Brewer's office, the letter that was provided, the fact that Gail Brewer came down to M&N, appointed 2 seats on the board. Apparently Vanessa Corwin has been vanquished. I don't know where she is anymore. She's not on the board anymore. But she had talked about in her complaint the intimate involvement of Gail Brewer's office, and she had attached to her complaint our notices of claim and our affidavits. She could have asked for a judgment on the pleadings, and they would have had to give it to her because there's no controversy here. So there's nothing that we're fighting about. There is a state actor. There's no statute of limitations, and she would have gotten a judgment on the pleadings. But instead, they created a false court record that now we have to overcome. So as we're leaving the courtroom, Dean and I are walking. There's about 5 to 7 minutes left, and you asked about how I was physically assaulted and beaten. As we're leaving the courtroom, we're going home. Mr. Perry had called for an elevator, and we all want to leave, and I've got this court security officer who's following me around. Nobody can tell me why the court security officers and the marshals are following me around in every federal courthouse that I go into for the past year, but I found out through discovery in another case that I'd been defamed by the U.S. Marshals. So I've been asking the U.S. Marshals, why are you following me around? Can you please no, but you're not following anybody else around. And they've been lying to me for about 4 months, going, we don't know. We'll try to find out. They know. They defamed me. I've got these court security officers following me around, hounding me, harassing me, stalking me through the federal courthouses. So as Dean and I are leaving, and Mr. Perry is leaving, he's the attorney for the plaintiffs, we push a button to ask for an elevator, and Dean asks Mr. Perry a question. I don't have a reason to talk to Mr. Perry because I talked to him before the hearing, and I told him everything that I needed to say, that Paula Gloria had sent an email, and there were other producers who had been banned, and here are your sworn affidavits, and, here's your irrefutable documentary evidence, and here are your witnesses who are willing to help you with your case. So I don't have anything to say to this man. But Dean asks him a question, and Mr. Perry's face lights up, and Dean says, can you please explain to me why you wouldn't talk about Gail Brewer? And he started to ask some other questions, and Mr. Perry lights up a little bit, starts to walk towards Dean to answer the question, and all of a sudden the court security officer interjects, starts screaming, yelling, carrying on. The elevator opens. Mr. Perry escapes into the elevator. Me and Dean just want to leave. We don't know what's going on. We just want to get away from this guy who's been, stalking us ever since I entered the courthouse. And the court security officer grabs me, throws me to the ground, starts to arrest me, beats me, claiming that I'm harassing somebody. I'm like, I'm not harassing anybody. I'm trying to leave the building. My business here is done. And I guess Dean can take it from there.
Yeah, Dean, what did you see?
That's when I saw a federal hitman. I actually was 18 inches, and I saw this man purposely try to break Lydia's shoulder blade, wrench the arm out of the socket while he was taking his knee and kidney punching her while she was on the ground with her right arm handcuffed with one of those plastic things. and then trying to grab the left arm in a half Nelson, but he was doing it in such a way that you were going to break the arm.
And Lydia, you already have back injuries.
That's the other
she's
thing.
Screaming
this is
top
an
of her
aggravated.
voice that she has back injuries.
This is an aggravated physical assault on me. I have medical records from my neurologist that I have spinal injuries. I have herniated disc, pinched nerve, and I put into my paperwork. Now, remember, I show up at like 9:45. The hearing's about at 10. It started a little bit late, and I put into my paperwork. I said, I have Social Security disability for back injuries. I'm trying very hard to avoid surgery. I have also other very serious physical health issues, so I want more time to be able to draft, the motions to intervene as of right. So I let them know that I had spinal injuries, and everybody knew long before this because I've been going down to the courthouse to respond to, to take care of my business in September and October, and have a little court watchers group. I, was going to bankruptcy court with a couple people, and I can't explain why there are these court security officers that are just hounding me. People are like, there's one instance where you got like 4 armed guards with guns. They're like, what's going on? And I'm asking one of the U.S. Marshals, Deputy U.S. Marshal Jason W. Bragsgala, like 4 months ago when I visited the courts. I'm like, why are the U.S. Marshals and the court security officers following me, nobody else? Why are they defaming me with their conduct? And he's like, I don't know, I'll find out. I'm like, great, could you call me and let me know? So what came to light was because last year, February 4th, 2015, I tried to access my federal grand jury for constitutional violations. And this is also important for Dee Dee Halleck's case because she's claiming that she has a constitutional violation, that her constitutionally protected and guaranteed right to free speech has been violated. For that, she can go to a federal grand jury and start a criminal investigation. So when your constitutionally protected and guaranteed rights are violated, the U.S. Attorney's Office, that would be Preet Bharara, must help you and must prosecute. Because, and this is a case right on point that I found in the Southern District of New York, for constitutional violations, the U.S. Attorney must prosecute because we don't sometimes obey our Constitution and sometimes we don't. So if Dee Dee Halleck really wanted to put teeth into her complaint, she should go down, she can and she should go down to her federal grand jury, and they are charged by law with investigating crimes in their district. So because Dee Dee Halleck is bringing up constitutional violations, she can put real teeth into her complaint against these corporations by going down to her federal grand jury, meeting with the foreman of her federal grand jury, and starting an investigation. Now, I went down last year, February 4th, 2015.
From the Schaghticoke Indian tribe. The Schaghticokes fought on the side of Washington, and the United Nations worked with her grandfather, They worked with her grandfather to create what became the United Nations. And she came in her full, princess Indian royal regalia. She was beautiful with the braids, and I couldn't get into the studio. No reason, all of a sudden, I couldn't get into the studio. And unfortunately, she's passed away since then. This would have been an extremely important interview. It's like every time you had a really important guest, they would block the studio. On the other hand,
that's very significant because the franchise agreement says that there's not supposed to be any editorial control.
Listen. And then the other extreme is
coming in and a shoe designer and a band, and at that point, they had pulled in every white voice to push out this quote unquote hipster get out the vote. And I looked at them, and in fact, they were violating every rule because there was pizza they were eating in all these places, and you're not allowed to have food in the studio. They broke every rule, and they put us black people in this little 8 by 16 foot room. And I had 5,000 more people than them.
Yeah, no, I know.
I had 20 girls.
I know. Once,
it off.
I was so gullible for so many years. Joe really opened my eyes up to how much I'd been abused. But I had a guest once. She was a princess.
Out of our live Studio One booking, which we have every week, we are a live show. We are there every week forever, okay?
What was the name of that show?
Us and they cancel us.
What was the name of that show, Dean?
It was Are You a Star? But at that point we were doing John Ashford,
I
okay?
see. Yeah.
Who was this famous black shoe designer, the only black shoe designer in the world.
Well,
And so you have a black president being elected, and that night they threw Rich Gethard on the station to get out the white college vote.
wow.
And we walked in, and I said, so where's our studio? He says, oh, well, you don't have a studio tonight. I said, what do you mean we don't have a studio? I have 20 women.
He was being banned, and in my case, one of my regular guests and co-hosts, who is also an independent producer, was told explicitly, and he was actually stand-up enough guy to provide a sworn affidavit. In my case, Greg Sutton, at a meet and greet social function at M&N, took my regular co-host and guest aside and told him not to appear on my shows. So that's censorship. That's editorial control. That's
I got you one step better. Zenaida Mendez, who was Charlie Rangel's chief of staff, who is the public outspoke person for them, was canceling our shows, our bookings that we had made, and putting hers in.
Right. I wondered once how Roberto was so savvy on Karen Hudes being a whistleblower for the World Bank. She eventually turned out to be a lame-o and called me and Joe Vatican operatives, because she's not getting the ratings that she wants on the internet. I thought, how could Roberto figure this out? Well, no, listen, let me finish. Dean.
Paula, but never a Vatican operative. I can believe that one.
No, listen, but I thought, how could Roberto figure this out? Well, it's easy. He figures out who the lamos are because they let you go ahead and interview them and work with them, and as soon as there's somebody good, they block it. So that's why the staff was always so hip, and I always felt when I was there, how come I don't really understand what's going on here?
Well, no, in my case, it got really serious because as Dee Dee was talking about,